I'm Zainab Zafar, and this is the wampum belt that our firm has proposed. So I will be going over my presentation for it. Um, Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you for the opportunity to present our proposed Royal Proclamation 2025 Wampum Belt. I present this belt not as a symbolic gesture, but as a legal and relational commitment grounded in Indigenous legal orders. Wampum belts are living legal instruments. They record treaties, laws, and shared responsibilities between nations. This belt responds to the ongoing reality that Canada's legal system remains incomplete because Indigenous laws are not fully recognized as authoritative within governance and policy making. Truth and reconciliation requires more than inclusion. It requires legal pluralism, where Indigenous laws, civil law, and common law exist on equal footing. Rather than a colonial hierarchy, this belt reflects the necessary shift. A lot of you might be asking why a new royal proclamation is necessary. Canada's current relationship with Indigenous nations remains inconsistent with the spirit of reconciliation. Indigenous legal orders are often treated as cultural rather than legal, which undermines their authority and relevance. This imbalance is rooted in the doctrine of discovery, which continues to structure Canadian legal and government systems. As explained, this domination code reduced Indigenous governance and justifies colonial control. Any renewed commitment by the Crown must confront this history honestly. Our proposed Royal Proclamation 2025 belt directly addresses these failures through its design, symbolism, and legal meaning. The great Now I'll go into each symbol and what our wampum belt represents and what it's supposed to mean. The great white pine, the tree of peace. At the center of the belt stands the great white pine, also known as the tree of peace. Under the great law of peace, this tree represents a living constitution, a framework for governance grounded in unity, consensus, and shared responsibility. The great law cannot be divided into categories such as law, ethics, or story. Its teachings are interconnected and lived through relationships, language, and community. By centering the Tree of Peace, this belt affirms that Indigenous legal orders are foundational and not peripheral. The roots of the trees are depicted as thick and prominent. This emphasizes the depth and strength of the Indigenous legal orders as a foundation upon which any renewed relationships must be built. The four white roots extend outward, symbolizing an invitation for all nations to follow them back to peace. These roots also represent Canada's responsibility to accept this invitation in good faith by honoring Indigenous governance and ensuring future lawmaking and policymaking is based on reciprocity rather than hierarchy. The eagle and the Canadian jay. They are resting on the branches of the tree of peace are two birds, an eagle and a Canada jay. The eagle represents Indigenous nations and Indigenous knowledge systems. It symbolizes wisdom and sharp vision and reflects the legitimacy of Indigenous oral traditions and laws. The eagle is colored orange to represent the ongoing need for truth and reconciliation. The Canada Jay represents Canada's legal and political system. It's colored red, reflecting the color of the Canadian flag and the Crown's legislative authority. Jay's intelligence and resourcefulness make it an appropriate symbol of Canadian governance. Both birds are positioned at the same level on the tree. This placement rejects the colonial hierarchy that historically placed the Crown law above Indigenous law. Instead, it affirms equality between the legal system and acknowledges that reconciliation requires a shared responsibility. Both birds are supported by the Tree of Peace, emphasizing that this renewed relationship must be grounded in cooperation and in a lasting commitment to Indigenous legal order. The footprints. Surrounding the Tree of Peace are footprints that you can see are going all around rather than a traditional parallel line seen in earlier wampum belt designs. Parallel lines often represent coexistence and non-interference, but they do not accurately reflect Canada's relationship with Indigenous nations. The footprints represent colonial intrusion and overstepping on Indigenous lands. The earlier footprints are red, symbolizing the colonial government's intent to dominate through land theft, deception, and impose laws. The Indigenous lands were taken through practices that disregarded Indigenous understandings of land as living beings rather than a commodity. As the footprints grow larger or change in color. They reflect the expansion of colonial authority through policies that erase indigenous languages, cultures, and governance systems. Indigenous laws were replaced with imposed legal structures. Midway through the road, the footprints begin to decrease in size and fade from red to green. This shift represents the possibility of reconciliation through dialogue and accountability, the recognition of indigenous laws. And, the green color reflects the indigenous values of interconnectedness and respect for the land. Moving forward, towards the end, the footprints remain, but are smaller and fully green. This reflects uh, a future guided by a two-eyed seeing, using Indigenous and Canadian legal systems together without dominance. The footprints remain as a reminder of past harm while still allowing a shared path forward. The water ripples. At the base of the belt are water ripples emerging outwards from a single drop. The water plays a foundational role in Indigenous legal orders. Um, it is not merely a resource, but a legal, political, and relational force that connects people, land, and future generations. The ripples symbolize that every decision, whether legal, environmental, or political, create effects that extend far beyond its initial moment. Treaties are not static agreements frozen in time. They are living relationships that continue to shape communities and responsibilities across generations. As the Cree elders teach, the phrase, as long as the water flows, refers to water that breaks at birth, affirming that tree responsibilities extend to future generations. These agreements are spiritual and relational covenants rooted in reciprocity and shared obligations. Canada's failure to recognize and Canada's failure to honor Indigenous interpretations of water governance has contributed to environmental harm and legal instability. As explained, the colonial systems often approach water governance through fragmented and politically driven frameworks, leaving water vulnerable to exploitation. In contrast, Indigenous nations continue to uphold relational responsibilities to water as a source of law and life. By placing water ripples in the middle, like next to the trees, this belt emphasizes that all legal and political relationships must be grounded in the responsibilities that flow from water. Any meaningful future in environmental governance must begin by honoring Indigenous legal orders. To conclude, Mr. Prime Minister, this proposed royal proclamation of the 2025 Wampum Belt offers the Crown a principled framework for a renewed relationship with Indigenous nations. It acknowledges the failure of the past, confronts the enduring impact of colonial hierarchy, and affirms legal pluralism as essential to reconciliation. This belt is both symbolic and substantive. By formally presenting it, the Crown can commit to a future defined by mutual respect, shared responsibility, and full of recognition of Indigenous jurisdiction. The time for hierarchy is over. The future of Canada rests on shared equal grounds where Indigenous law, civil law, and common law stand together as long as the water flows. Thank you.